doing, everybody? Welcome to another episode. This is Jay Synergy. Welcome to another episode of Jay Synergy's Talks. Today's episode is about the conflict that we got brewing over there between us and Russia. Vladimir Putin has not only threatened to use nukes in Ukraine, but has also threatened the United States, saying that if we continue to step in across the boundaries, he won't hesitate to use nukes. I mean, this is in the midst of all type of things going on with North Korea at the time. They're threatening us with nukes. Russia has the most nukes. Like I always say, this is Jay Synergy Talks. Like I always tell y'all, fall is going to be harder to come up. And people, please stay awoke in these last days, in these trying times. Don't live in the Matrix. Don't be distracted by Yeezy, Kyrie Irving. Little delay on that one. Or any other celebrity gossip that's going on right now. We have all type of chaos going on in this world right now. And the fact that the President Biden actually came out and said we haven't had a threat since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and if this war breaks out, it could be like the War of Armageddon. I mean, that's pretty serious, so we gotta stay woke. Think about all the things that you learned as a kid, no matter what your belief system is now. We'll just throw out even if it's Bible or biblical information. In Revelations, they always speak about Armageddon. You think it's a coincidence that the president just keeps speaking on things like this and talking about the world of mass destruction, threats of wars, calamity, inflation, death by design, death by accident, natural disasters? No, it's time for everybody to stay woke and get focused. Walk in faith. Continue to tell your people that you love them every day. Try to be the best that you could be every day, a greater version of yourself, and lean on your discretion and focus that you get from the higher power. That's all I can say. Now, I'm a broadcaster, a podcaster, an entertainer, and a content creator, but I'm also focused. I'm also a man of God and God-fearing. I continue to walk in my discretion, and we got to stay focused, people. I'm going to continue to enlighten y'all. I'm going to continue to bring this content, and I'm going to continue to tell y'all don't live in the Matrix, meaning everything that you see is not what it is. You got to use discretion. The spiritual warfare and all type of principalities that we're fighting against on a daily basis. And there's a lot of evil dictators in this world. And don't think for 1 second that if Putin feels like he's dying for a cause or fighting for a cause, which we all know is ridiculous, that he won't try to take us out or anybody else in the process when he sees he's cornered in. And once one country lets him off, God and the angels need to be with us. All hell will break loose. With that being said, make sure y'all continue to hear the statements about this escalation, brewing escalation that is between not only the Ukrainian and Russia war, but also now we're getting tied into it as well as NATO, because Russia is making direct threats towards us now. And President Biden said we're not taking it for a joke, and we will be prepared to retaliate if we have to. And also, Iran, as well as North Korea, has been supplying Russia with weapons and everything too, where nobody's supposed to be dealing with Russia. So nobody likes us right now. And our military is already across all the world. So we have to stay focused, stay diligent. Make sure you stay in the news, or if not, go to your local YouTube or anybody else is giving out useful information. It's not all about little trinkets and charms and worship by these celebrities. Make sure you stay focused. Don't live in the Matrix. Continue to like, support, subscribe, donate, whatever you feel worthy. Spread the message, spread the information. Jay Synergy Talks, the show is out. I'm back, and I'm going to continue to say don't live in the Matrix. Remember the fall. It's going to always be harder than to come up. And stay tuned to see all these never-seen events that we got going on, the escalation and the time of chaos in the war between the United States and Russia. See how it all escalates. Stay tuned to the end. Don't forget to hit that like button. Much love to y'all. Stay blessed. Peace. I'm out.
Tonight, the standoff with Russia has escalated, with the U.S. saying it will deploy thousands of troops to allies in Eastern Europe as a message to Putin. CBS's Charlie Daggett reports tonight from inside Estonia, the former Soviet republic and now a member of NATO.
It's important important that we send a strong signal to Mr. Putin and, frankly, to the world that NATO matters to the United States. It matters to our allies.
That signal, shipping out 2,000 troops from Fort Bragg, North Carolina to Poland and Germany, and redeploying roughly 1,000 forces from Germany to Romania. The decision comes as new satellite imagery reveals a Russian troop buildup in areas bordering Ukraine, including Belarus, where joint military drills took place today with tanks and combat helicopters. Countering that threat in the Baltic nation of Estonia this week, America has been flexing its own military might, sending a squadron of F-15 fighters to strengthen NATO policing missions. These American fighter jets have been deployed with NATO partners on the alliance's eastern flank, right along the border with Russia, and the mission has never been more critical.
What we're primarily looking for is any aircraft that are operating outside of normal international rules that might infringe on NATO airspace.
Such as the Russian fighter jet we're told was intercepted in these skies just last weekend. With tensions rising in Ukraine, the aim is to reassure NATO partners while keeping Russia.
There are alarming reports now that Russian military commanders recently discussed how and when they might use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. The New York Times reports the U.S. intelligence picked up on those conversations, and the fact that senior Russian military leaders were even having the discussions alarmed the Biden administration, because it showed how frustrated Russian generals were about their failures on the ground, and suggests that Mr. Putin's veiled threats to use nuclear weapons might not just be words. Notably, the Times reports Vladimir Putin was not a participant in those discussions. Following that report, the National Security Council spokesman John Kirby told reporters U.S. intelligence is keeping a very close eye on Russia's nuclear threat. Kirby insisted there are still no indications that Moscow is actively preparing for a nuclear strike.
Monitor this as best we can. When you're talking about a modern nuclear power, the leader of a modern nuclear power, as Mr. Putin is, talk as recklessly and irresponsibly as he has been doing about the potential use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine, you got to take it seriously. And we've been taking it seriously since the very beginning, which means we've been monitoring this as closely as we can.
This all comes as Russian troops continue to lose ground and Ukrainian forces close in on the major strategic port city of Kherson in the south. If and when the Battle of Kherson begins, it could be the most significant yet of this war.
Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. Today on ABC News Live, President Biden is warning of potential nuclear Armageddon. The president says the risk is the highest it's been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is Vladimir Putin's military loses ground in Ukraine and Russians flee his draft. Begin with President Biden's warning about Vladimir Putin's nuclear threat as Russian forces lose ground in Ukraine. Putin has said he will use all available means to protect Russian people and territory, including newly annexed areas of Ukraine. Now Biden says Putin is not joking, adding the risk of nuclear Armageddon hasn't been this high since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce has the latest.
Diane, this was a stark warning from the President Biden, sounding the alarm, saying that Putin's recent threats to use nuclear weapons amount to the most serious prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Biden says he knows Putin well and that Putin is not joking when he talks about the potential use of nuclear weapons or biological or chemical weapons. And Putin has said recently that he is not bluffing. As we have seen Putin struggling in his fight for Ukraine, the Russian president has been ramping up his saber rattling. He has said that he will use all available means to protect Russia. And he says the U.S. created the precedent to use nuclear weapons. Now, I am told the White House has seen no indication that Russia is preparing to use a nuclear weapon imminently, and the administration, the president, have been very clear on this. There will be consequences if Putin uses nuclear weapons in Ukraine. But as Biden said last night, the big question question now is, what is Putin's off-ramp? Diane, how does he find a way out of this?
Regarding Russian President Vladimir Putin's possible use of nuclear weapons is raising new concerns about the war in Ukraine. The president warned on Thursday that he takes Putin's threats seriously and that the world is closer to Armageddon. This as a counteroffensive by Ukrainian forces has Russia losing ground and its military on the run, as Charlie mentioned. Christina Ruffini has the very latest from the White House. Christina, good morning.
Good morning, Dana. Well, President Biden didn't respond to our shouted questions about those remarks yesterday as he boarded Marine One, but that same language is now being used by the Ukrainian president, who said in an interview he believes Russian officials are laying the groundwork with the Russian public for a potential possible future use of nuclear weapons.
I think that it's dangerous even to speak about it.
In an interview with the BBC, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said he doesn't know if Russia will use nuclear weapons, but he and President Biden agree on the consequences.
I agree, it is an Armageddon. It is the risk for the whole planet.
That word first uttered this week by President Biden at a closed-door Democratic fundraiser in New York, where he said, quote, "I don't think there's any such thing as the ability to easily use a tactical nuclear weapon and not end up with Armageddon," the risk of which, he added, the world hasn't faced since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Russia has an estimated 1,000 to 2,000 short-range nuclear weapons at storage sites around the country, including one close to the Ukrainian border. They could be launched from an aircraft, from the sea, or from the ground by a nuclear artillery shell. Here's one being tested by the U.S. Army in the 1950s.
This would be a serious mistake by Putin, but he needs to know that in advance so we can stop it from happening in the first place.
Congressman Mike McCall is the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
If we see any indication from the intelligence community that he's taking steps forward to launch a nuclear threat into Ukraine, I think we need to show that to the world.
The White House says President Biden's comments were not prompted by any specific evidence. A White House official tells us just a growing concern about Putin's rhetoric, which that individual called, quote, reckless and irresponsible. Now, in that same interview, President Zelensky was asked if Ukraine wins the war, does he think Putin survives? After pausing for a second, he said, quote, "I don't care."
Thank you so much for doing this, sir. Appreciate it.
Happy to.
So for people at home who don't know, this is the man room. During World War II, this is where it's basically the situation room for FBI to look at sensitive information. And now we're at a period where there's another high-stakes war in Europe. You recently said that this is the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis that there's a legitimate possibility of someone using a nuclear weapon, which could lead to Armageddon. That's the word you used. How realistic is it, do you think, that Putin would use a tactical nuclear weapon?
Well, I don't think he will, but I think it's irresponsible for him to talk about it. The idea that a world leader, one of the largest nuclear powers in the world, says he may use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. And the whole point I was making was it could lead to just a horrible outcome. And not because anybody intends to turn it into a world war or anything, but it just, once you use a nuclear weapon, mistakes that can be made, miscalculations, who knows what would happen.
What is the red line for the United States and NATO? And have you directed the Pentagon and other agencies to game out what a response would be if he did use a tactical nuclear weapon, or if he bombed the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine, or anything along those lines?
There's been discussions on that, but I'm not going to do that. It would be irresponsible of me to talk about what we would or wouldn't do.
Have you asked the Pentagon to game it out, though? I mean, just in case?
The Pentagon didn't have to be asked.
So, French President Macron told me that he doesn't think that Putin is acting rationally. And he said that he thinks a lot of this is because of how isolated Putin was for 2 years during the pandemic. And others who have dealt with him, Condi Rice and Bob Gates and James Clapper, have used words like erratic and unhinged to describe Putin's behavior today. Do you think Putin is a rational actor?
I think he is a rational actor who miscalculated significantly. Yeah, I think he thought, you may recall, I pointed out that they were going to invade all those 100,000 more troops there. No one believed that he was going to invade Ukraine. You listen to what he says. You listen to the speech he made after, when that decision was being made. He talked about the whole idea of he needed to be the leader of Russia, that united all the Russian speakers. I mean, I just think it's irrational.
So if he's not rational, and
no, I didn't say he's not rational.
So the speech is what
I think the speech is his objectives. I think he thought he was going to be welcomed with open arms. That this is the home of Mother Russia in Kyiv, and where he was going to be welcomed. And I think he just totally miscalculated.
So you talked about this a few days ago, the search for an off-ramp for him, because his back is against the wall. There are questions about how rational he is. He already was a brutal dictator. What is the off-ramp? Is there any acceptable way that he can leave, in his mind, without seizing territory in a way that would not be acceptable for Ukraine?
I don't know what's in his mind. Clearly, he could leave. He could just flat leave and still probably hold his position together in Russia. The idea that he's been able to convince the significant Russian people that this is something that he thought made sense, but now he's accomplished what he wanted to do, and it's time to bring Russians home.
Would you be willing to meet with him at the G20?
Look, I have no intention of meeting with him, but for example, if he came to me at the G20 and said, I want to talk about the release of Ukraine, I'd meet with him. I mean, it would depend, but I can't imagine. Look, we've taken a position. I just did a G7 meeting this morning. The idea, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. So I'm not about to, nor is anyone else prepared to negotiate with Russia about them staying in Ukraine, keeping any part of Ukraine, etc. So it would depend on specifically what he wanted to talk about. Look, he's acted brutally. I think he's committed war crimes, so I don't see any rationality in that.
When people hear the word Armageddon, they get scared. Used by a U.S. president, they get scared. Do you think, in any way, discussing this type of thing publicly, openly, Putin's possible use of nuclear weapons, might have the opposite effect of what you want? It might make some of our wobblier European allies be even more scared of confronting Putin.
Well, no, I don't think so at all. I think, look, there was a directed, when I'm talking to Putin, he, in fact, cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of tactical nuclear weapons as if that's a rational thing to do. The mistakes get made, and miscalculation could occur. No one can be sure what would happen, and it could end in Armageddon.
And you still are afraid of that, though, that it could?
Well, no, I don't think any rational person saying the initial use of a nuclear weapon, killing thousands of people, does not have the prospect of leading to something that can be way out of control.
Let's turn